We want to help close the Latino wealth gap. I want to be able to help them build generational wealth. I love access to innovation because of what it stands for.
Giving access to opportunities such as training, such as financing, introductions that people would not necessarily get.
This is part of an initiative that everyone is committed to, from the CEO down.
It's meaningful work that has to be done.
My name is Beatriz Acevedo.
I'm Dave Salvan, and I'm happy to be part of Access to Innovation.
The old Latino wealth gap. Joining me now, my buddy Dave Rubin, host of the Rubin Report. Dave, is there a Latino wealth gap? Because all the richest buddies I have are Mexican. My best buddy, he's about to buy a Lamborghini. I think it's like $218,000. All the Mexicans I know are rich.
Dude, I live in Miami. You know how many super rich Cubans are driving around in the craziest cars you have ever seen down here? By the way, on the Chiron under my name, is there any chance you could put Latino wealth gap expert or something like that? Hispanic wealth gap expert? Look, this is so endemic of everything wrong with everything right now. That bank, SVB, was not concerned with making a good return on the money that they were, that their people were depositing. They were doing all of this crazy diversity, equity, and inclusion nonsense. As a founder of a company, as you know, I started Locals a couple years ago and we ended up merging with Rumble. I never thought of my skin color as an important piece of what was going on there, and I certainly don't think my investors did either. We had a good product. We worked really hard. You lose money for a while as a startup, and then eventually, if you have a good product, good things happen. Nobody in the investing world looks at the skin color or the sexuality or the genitals of anyone building a product and is like, that's why I'm gonna or not gonna invest. What they go for is, are you doing something good, something worthwhile, and something that I can make some money on? And this endless obsession with race, that used to be something racists were obsessed with. Now apparently it's the anti-racists.
Dave, to your point, because as you pointed out, you're a successful businessman, and congratulations on that, by the way, but I don't understand. That's how I look at the world. That's how you look at the world. It would never occur to me if I'm doing anything, forget business, if I'm starting a Little League team, it would never occur to me do we have enough black people? Or do we need more women? Who's gay? We're short on the gays. It would never occur to me to look at the world this way. Yet that's how these people look at everything. What happened? Is this a childhood thing? How did this sickness grow so much?
Yeah, well, look, as Ben Shapiro has been quoted as saying once or twice, facts don't care about your feelings. And there is a generation in America right now that has grown up thinking that their feelings matter more than anything else, that it does not matter whether you are actually good at anything, whether you are competent at anything, whether you have original thoughts or anything to actually offer. What they seemingly care about is to virtue signal that they are good. And the best way you can do that as a white person is by bowing. And that for everyone else, that the age-old stuff that we had put to bed about not caring about skin color is now something that you should care about. It's nonsense. And Jesse, joking aside, the real issue here is that once this woke nonsense enters any institution, whether it's an educational institution or a government institution or any organization or company, you will slowly degrade the product. If you say to a certain set of people, we will let you into college, because of your skin color, and then grad school from there, and med school from there, and then you're gonna get the job from there, et cetera, you're gonna end up with worse doctors. You are gonna end up with worse pilots. If I had a heart attack today, I would not care about the skin color of my surgeon. I would want the best surgeon. But if we then extrapolate this situation further, where we have doctors being hired by their skin color and sexuality, you will be guaranteed that you will not get the best doctor, and the best doctors will flee. They're probably all gonna go to some island on Bora Bora or something, and only rich people will get to see them.
Yeah, it's why I call it the death of everything. It's just going to slowly kill everything around us. And look, you make such a great point with the doctor. I think many people don't make that connection, though. They'll see some internet video of a group of vicious little monsters at Georgetown Law just being little communists And they think, college kids. What they don't think about, Dave, is no, that kid, 20 years from now, he's going to be the judge presiding over your case. He's going to look at your Facebook page and say, throw the book at him. And that's how these people think, and that's how they're working their way through everything.
You know, Jesse, years ago when I was one of the first people, especially because I was a lefty at the time and I was talking about what's going on here with quashing down free speech and all of this stuff and shouting down speakers and the immaturity and not debating ideas and all of that stuff, one of the things that people would tell me all the time, usually on the left, they would say, Dave, you know, when these kids get out of college, the real world will show them what's what. But I think what we've now seen after the last 10 years is that the real world basically folded easier than a wet paper bag. You know, they got out into the real world and they somehow took over institutions. So you literally have giant publishing houses like Penguin Books or Simon & Schuster, where the inmates are running the asylum and junior editors get to decide what book is going to be published or not. So the real world, unfortunately, may already be down that path that you're talking about, where everything in essence will be ruined, except that a small group, I would say, of conservatives will just keep building different things and move to better states. And that's just how it'll be.
Americans can have confidence that the banking system is safe. Your deposits will be there when you need them. During the Obama-Biden administration, we put in place tough requirements on banks like Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, including the Dodd-Frank law to make sure that the crisis we saw in 2008 would not happen again. Unfortunately, the last administration rolled back some of these requirements. I'm going to ask Congress and the banking regulators to strengthen the rules for banks to make it less likely this kind of bank failure would happen again. Look, the bottom line is this. Americans can rest assured that our banking system is safe. See you in California.
Mr. President, what do you know right now about why this happened? And can you assure Americans that there won't be a ripple effect?
Do you expect other banks to fail, Mr. President?
We are so screwed. Joining me now, Carol Roth, not only a recovering investment banker, author of the book the whole book's going to come true. I know it is. The book is called You Will Own Nothing. It would be a really good time to purchase that if you want to know where we're going. Carol, don't worry. Congress is going to step in and fix all this now. Okay, you know what? Let's set Biden aside for a minute because I know we're all pressed for time today. You most definitely are. FDIC, Silicon Valley Bank, pretend like I'm an idiot. What happened?
Well, that's a big stretch for me, Jesse, but I'm going to buckle down here and try to pretend like you're an idiot. So basically, when you have Joe Biden coming out, it's the arsonist who has burned your house down coming out to reassure you that they've got the water, that they're, want to take credit for now putting out the fire. And what has happened, as we've discussed before, is we have had the Federal Reserve and the government basically playing God, and particularly the Fed is artificially suppressing interest rates for basically the last 15 years. And this got accelerated again with the government's response to COVID. They, again, took interest rates, their target interest rates to near zero, put out lots of capital into the market. So what happened was all of these companies and individuals were flush with cash, and particularly in certain areas, like in Silicon Valley, companies raised a lot of money and they wanted to put their money into the bank. So they went to Silicon Valley Bank, who has been a longtime friend to founders and startups, in Silicon Valley. And that bank increased its deposits by basically, they tripled them between 2019 and 2021. The challenge is when banks take in deposits, the way that they make money is by turning around and lending that money out at a higher interest rate, and then they make that differential. They didn't have enough people who needed loans to loan that money out to. So in the interim period, they decided they needed to do something with the capital. Now, here's where it gets really weird. They think, okay, we're going to put them in some quote unquote safe securities, things like treasuries, the notes and bonds that the government issues. But they go out and they lock them down, not for 30 days or 3 months or a year, but for 10 years, basically betting that the Fed would never raise interest rates again. But then we know what happened. Inflation got out of control because of all of this stimulus and all of this artificial suppressing of interest rates and all the supply issues caused by Biden and shutting down our energy supply, this huge snowball. And when they had to go back and raise the rates, a couple things happened. First of all, depositors went, well, why do I have my money in the bank earning next to nothing here? I'm going to go find a higher paying bank, or maybe I'll even invest in a treasury security, which, as of like last week, you could get like 5% on a very short duration treasury security. And then other people with the economy going on found their businesses maybe needed some operating capital. So the withdrawals from the bank started happening at a higher rate than was expected. And all of this money, all this extra money is tied up in 10-year securities. Now, when interest rates go up, the value of that security goes down. There's an inverse relationship, because basically, why would you buy a bond that's paying a smaller interest rate when you could get a higher interest rate once? So they were forced to sell some of those securities and take a loss on that. And that whole sort of thing started snowballing out of control. Now, had they held them to maturity, by the way, they would have incurred no losses. It's not like it was a toxic loan. So this was basically a Fed-created situation where they fixed the interest rate really low, drove up the supply, and then created this scenario where then they drove up the interest rate, and this bank was stuck in the middle. Why they didn't come up with a solution to this before they communicated it to the market and basically created a bank run is one of those things I still cannot wrap my head around. I don't know if it's just complete arrogance and being so isolated that they didn't understand that this was going to be the implication of what happened when they communicated it, particularly in a close-knit community like Silicon Valley, where everybody's talking on Slack and WhatsApp. And, when they realized, one other piece of this is that so many of these depositors were not insured. They were above that $250,000 threshold from FDIC insurance because they were companies. They were companies that put their cash that they managed their business with in here. That was part of the panic too. So all of these things kind of created this perfect storm, a very different scenario than had this bank made toxic loans or made risky derivative bet. It's just like literal stupidity that starts and ends with the Fed and the government.
Okay, so who got bailed out? We're all seeing all these headlines today, FDIC, and people think it's 2008 again, which it's not yet. But as of now, who got bailed out? What's going on?
Okay, so I know that this is not popular, particularly amongst many of our friends, but the reality is this was probably the right thing to do at this stage. I mean, frankly, they should have done this before it was a panic, but given the fact that it was a panic, this was the right thing to do. Who got bailed out are the depositors, the people who have trust and faith in the financial system. It's not the shareholders. The shareholders are not getting made whole. The management team has been shown the door. So it's not like they are bailing out these people who did all of these bad things. This is a bad outcome, but they're trying to put in place some confidence that if you have your money in a bank, that you don't have to worry about creating a bank run and a panic, because the same thing won't happen. And I challenge people, if this bank had been called the Small Business Bank of Iowa, and it was a bunch of other small businesses that had their money in there, you would probably be singing a different tune. I know nobody likes Silicon Valley and the rich tech bros and whatnot, but think of the ripple effects throughout the system. One of the things I saw on Twitter, for example, was Etsy, which is a marketplace where you can buy crafts. I'm sure your wife gets like her cute little pillows that you talk about there, something like that. But a lot of artists and entrepreneurs sell their wares there. And Etsy, as a marketplace, does their banking in part with Silicon Valley Bank. So they sent out a note to their customers saying, we're not sure when we can pay you. Do you want the little artist to not get paid because of this chain reaction? Now, obviously, what the Fed and the Treasury did will now allow that to, hopefully get paid. But those are the kinds of chain reactions. And if they hadn't done something, this was going to be a contagion that would have spread to other regional banks and would have just been a mess. So it's not, obviously, I'm a capitalist. It's not a traditional bailout.
I know. My question to you is this, and I really want to know, because I
Right.
saw this quote: "No losses associated with the resolution of Silicon Valley Bank will be borne by the taxpayer." Okay, so you say we're going to make some business whole who invested and they weren't going to get all their money back. Who's going to be doing the making of whole here? Where's this money come from in the beginning?
Yeah, so the reality is the taxpayer always pays for everything. If you either pay for it directly through raising taxes, you pay for it through the erosion of the purchasing power of your dollar, you pay through it through more fees from the bank. As I mentioned, this wasn't an insolvent business. I mean, the Fed can come in and loan against this portfolio, and there's probably not that much of a differential that they need to solve for here. What I have heard, and this is all unfolding, so this could shift. This is just my interpretation right now, particularly for the two banks that they were just addressing, Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, which, oh, by the way, Barney Frank of the Dodd-Frank architecture sits on the board of. But what they were planning to do is that they were going to, I guess, the easiest way to say is expand FDIC, which is paid for by fees from the broad set of banks. So my guess is that in this particular case, the broad set of banks will be given some sort of a fee assessment, and how that will hit you. It means either you're going to earn less on your money or they're going to charge you additional fees. So yes, you indirectly do end up paying for it, but just not through a traditional tax hike.
What a shock. Real quick, Carol, I know we've kept you long. I'm sorry. Just real quick. Signature Bank, you brought it up. We didn't have time to get to it. Are we anticipating some bad financial stuff to snowball from here? Everyone thought, what if there's another one? Now there's another one. What do you anticipate from here?
I mean, it really depends on how people react to the president, which I know doesn't give you a lot of confidence.
Oh,
Did they hear Joe Biden and go, yes, I feel like my deposits are secure? So assuming people settle down, there's going to be more fallout. There's some crypto contagion. There's some other things that are going on that will probably have some fallout. But hopefully these actions have sort of quashed panic for people running in and just, wholesale pulling out all of their deposits. However, as we get more details on how they might, quote unquote, backstop other people's deposits, things could shift very quickly. So it's far from over. Make sure you go to your own bank or financial institution. Make sure you're FDIC insured, or with a credit union, it's NCUA. If you have securities, make sure they're SIPC insured. If you're over any thresholds, move the money around in a way that they are protected by that level of insurance. And long term, make sure that you have some of your money in hard assets, a form factor you can control, because nobody can come to your house and do a run on your gold and precious metals and things like that, without encountering you with a shotgun. So that's my 2 cents.
Carol Roth, thank you. I know you're going to have a whirlwind of a media day given all this news. Thank you for giving us some time. We appreciate you. Tell me about your story. What happened with you?
Well, I first encountered this situation back in 2018, I believe was the first time. And I went to a contest, flew out to California, had booked a place to stay, and actually spent money out of my own pocket to be able to be there, along with some help from some sponsors. And I realized upon getting there that there was a male in my division. And then it happened again in 2020 when I traveled to Chicago. And the first couple times it happened, I honestly thought that this was going to be something that was very quickly resolved, that people would realize was not the right way to handle it, and that wasn't the right way to go forward with the situation, that there would be a way to include everyone without doing so at the expense of female athletes. But then in 2021, I competed in a qualifier for a Red Bull contest, Red Bull Cornerstone, and I was invited to a finals event in Lincoln, Nebraska, where I went out and, again, the day of the contest, found out that there was a male in the division. And this person actually went home with $5,000 of the women's prize money, leaving me in second place. At the time that it occurred, I was really unsure how to handle it, and I didn't know how to approach the situation. It's a very uncomfortable situation to be in, obviously. So I reached out to Red Bull privately by email, of which we'd corresponded before, thinking that they would have a discussion with me. but unfortunately, they completely ignored me. And it got me wondering how many other people are trying to speak up and being shut down. So I turned to social media, which I had a small following on Instagram at the time. And I posted all the details of what had occurred along with the email that I had sent Red Bull that was ignored. And that post went viral immediately, which was not what I expected, but I quickly realized how many people are really concerned about this issue and how often it's happening in other sports aside from skateboarding. And since then, I've continued to use my voice because I think this is an issue worth fighting for. And I don't want to be the last generation of female athletes to experience equal opportunity and fairness in sports like I was afforded growing up, but unfortunately had taken away from me as an adult.
I never even considered that. Boy, that's quite a way to put that. The last generation of females that have their own sports. Golly. All right, what's the backlash been like?
The backlash has mostly been online bullying. At first, when I first posted this, my small following, a lot of them turned on me and called me names, called me a bigot, called me transphobic, all the names in the book that they go through when somebody speaks out against the woke agenda. But then the post started getting shared and media picked up on it. And I realized that the support that I was receiving outweighed the backlash greatly. Another interesting part to my story that I think differs a little bit from some of the other athletes that have spoken up is I happen to be Jewish. So I was called horrible names and attacked for being a Jew, which really blew my mind because this is a crowd that claims to be all about inclusivity and diversity. But the second I spoke up, I was attacked for my ethnicity.
Taylor, you know what? I want to play this video for you, and there's something that's been hitting me. You're the perfect person to ask. Here's this video.
What is a woman? Hold on. Hold on. Go ahead.
I didn't have anything to say yet. Okay.
But what is a woman?
A person.
No, but what is the definition of what is a woman?
I don't know, I'm confused now.
I personally, as an individual, respect trans people. I respect trans women. So I'm not going to come on here and invalidate them by saying that. I understand completely where you're coming from. But just from my personal preference, I don't feel comfortable doing that.
Answering the question. So what is a woman?
I'm going to say what she said. I don't feel comfortable. I just feel like that's like not... I don't know. I feel like there's a better question that could be asked in this situation.
I've seen that clip circling the internet.
Mm-hmm. And here's what hits me, and I understand that's totally easy for me to say. What hits me is how few women have stood up and done what you do. I know there are some and there are more now, which is why I applaud you for it, because that inspires people to do it. But I can count them on two hands, if I even need more than one hand, the women that have come up and stepped up and said, no, enough is enough. I'm not going to be erased. I'm not going to live in a world of make-believe. Why haven't there been more, Taylor? Because everyone in the world knows that's a dude, right? Everyone in the world knows. I don't care what words people put on it. Everyone looks and sees the exact same thing, and yet the percentage of the population is about that high that will say it. Why aren't there more?
It's really heartbreaking to see how many young women especially are afraid to state an obvious fact that women are adult human females. We are females. We have XX chromosomes. And I think the reason why there's hesitancy in saying so publicly is because they see the backlash that someone like myself has faced. And I even had a lot of fear before I spoke up, wondering what this was going to mean for my life, for my future. But I felt an obligation morally to speak up, especially having been in second place and having been in a contest where there was thousands of dollars involved. I knew that my story mattered and people needed to hear it. And if I didn't say anything, no one would know that this happened. But what I want people to know is the bullying and the dogpiling that you see online isn't real life. In real life, I've gotten nothing but support. I literally got job offers for this. I actually took one of them, and now I work out at Timcast, which has been a dream job for me. And I've had tens of thousands of people reach out by private message to tell me thank you for speaking up, because they've been waiting for someone to use their voice and they're scared of consequences like being doxxed, losing their job, having retaliation against their own children or themselves. And I can understand that, but the fear mongering that we see is a tactic that's used to silence us. And the more people who stay silent, the longer this lie can be painted that we're the minority here, when in fact, the majority of people are actually on our side. And this isn't a political issue. It's actually very nonpartisan in the sense that people who disagree on a lot of other issues can unite on this one, because we all care about women's rights. We care about our daughters. We care about the female athletes that we love that are in our lives. And even people who have no connection to this or are not involved in sports, they have enough common sense to know this is wrong. But I'm hoping that more and more young women especially begin to realize that they should be able to answer a question like that and have the self-respect to do so. And you can do so and still respect somebody who struggles with gender dysphoria and may want to present a certain way or make decisions in their own lifestyle to live a way that makes them more comfortably. This isn't meant to be hateful towards anyone, rather to protect female athletes and the integrity of sport.
Taylor, I appreciate it. Good luck to you. Love Tim. Give him my best. Joining me now is somebody who probably doesn't need any introduction to you. She is the host of the Trish Regan Show, also TrishReganIntel.com. Okay, Trish, we've seen all the talking points now for 2 days. 2 banks closed, Moody's downgrades 6 others. Sure feels like the beginning of something ugly. What say you?
I think we got a real problem here. I think you've got a Federal Reserve that moved very aggressively to hike rates. By the way, we got inflation data out today, which indicates they need to do that. They moved aggressively, but it was too much, too soon for a banking system that hadn't quite caught up. I mean, all the banks were sitting there with paper at 1.5% Treasury notes. And now they're faced with this massive change in rates. They should have seen it coming, by the way. Jesse, I think if they had listened to me or probably to you as well, any of the discussions on inflation that we've had, it was out there. But they were drinking the Kool-Aid. They believed what Powell told them. They believed what Janet Yellen was saying. They believed what Biden was saying. Oh, this inflation is just transitory. And so they did not hedge properly their portfolios. As a result, there are multiple banks. Regionals are the ones I'm most worried about. They're going to face a very, very challenging situation. I think the reality of it, though, is now that the Fed came out and said, hey, we'll lend money to any bank that needs it, effectively guaranteeing everybody's deposits. The reality is you're going to find less and less regionals and more big banks when the year is done. And the problem for consumers is we all know what it's like to be on hold in another country somewhere. You're going to have to deal with a big bank that's probably going to charge you more and you're going to get less customer service. But listen, it's a mess. I think they did what they had to do, but it doesn't underscore how difficult I think a year this may be.
Trish, can you explain to me, because I've always had this problem when really smart people claim to be stupid or act stupid. Now, I understand ideologically I probably differ from many people who run the finance world nowadays, but they're not idiots. We're dealing with a bunch of University of Chicago, Harvard grads. I am an idiot, and I knew interest rates were going up because that's inevitable. In fact, they told us 1,000 times they have to jack the rates up in order to keep the economy from driving off a cliff with hyperinflation. I knew it was coming. I went to community college. None of these super smart guys could see this coming? Come on.
You make a good point. Now, at some point they should have, but keep in mind, I think they were a little bit distracted. Going further back, maybe they were drinking the Kool-Aid. By late last year, they really should have figured this one out. But you had a head of risk management for the UK at the Silicon Valley Bank who really seemed to be more focused on the promotion of LGBTQ issues, having a mental health blog on the company's website. That was a big part of her endeavor and her job, when she really should have been saying, wait a second, what are we doing to hedge our bets here in the event that interest rates move higher? I think that in this ESG, environment where companies are very, very pressured to be very politically correct, there has been an overemphasis on that political correctness, which comes at the cost, frankly, of the entire system. I mean, that's no exaggeration. The entire system right now is teetering on the edge because these people did not keep their eye on the ball.
Okay, will this refocus them? Because as you brought up, with these inflation numbers that we have today, we already know they're going to raise interest rates again. They've basically told us as much. This is going to be a bumpy year, to put it mildly, maybe a bumpy few years. Is this enough to slap some of these people awake, set aside the diversity hire stuff and start focusing?
I don't think it is yet. I mean, I think you're going to have to really start to see some shaky ground for people to focus more. Don't forget, one of the people that was actually on the board of the other bank that went out of business over the weekend, Signature Bank, happened to have been Barney Frank, Jesse. Barney Frank, who was very instrumental in the creation, if you ask me, of the entire 2008 crisis, because he had this belief that somehow banks should just be willing to lend to everyone, regardless of whether or not they had a job, whether or not they had any no income, no assets. The Nina loans, those were quite famous, and they were a result of Barney. So it's kind of the same cast of characters over there. They think that none of this is going to have any repercussions. And then when it does actually have an effect on things, they're like, whoa. And then they get government to step in and fix it all. But don't forget, this was a government problem. Jerome Powell and Joe Biden, they created this inflation by pumping so much money into the economy and then refusing to take the punch bowl away at the appropriate time. And then these, frankly, I'm sorry, these idiots at some of these banks never bothered to hedge things because, well, why bother? Biden says it's going to be okay. Jerome, Janet, they all think this inflation is going to be manageable. It's not manageable. The train has left the station. We're now looking at upwards of, 6% we got today. Inflation is here.
Where are we going from here? Are we looking at Great Recession? Are we looking at a depression? Are we going to have a little 2-month bump and we'll come back?
No, you know what? I'm going to tell you, Jesse, here's the thing, and this is what's sort of scary. They're going to kick the can down the road some more. So the reality is you need to address the inflation. We had this 6% jump in consumer prices, but they can't now. They can't because they wanted to raise rates 0.5 point next week. They're not going to be able to do it because then they're looking at this banking crisis. So what's going to happen? They might raise by 0.25 point. There are many analysts right now, including the folks over at Goldman Sachs, where I used to work, that think, no, you're not going to actually get any increase at all. It's going to be a big fat zero. So that's why, if you look at today's market, people are really excited because they're like, oh, the sugar high continues. And that's all this is. At some point, you got to actually fix things. And that's when the you-know-what hits the fans, so to speak. And we started to see a little bit of that. And they immediately said, whoa, we're going to take care of this. Well, what happens when you can't take care of it anymore?